What's happening, everybody, and welcome back to the Funky Brain Podcast. My name is Dennis, and this is my Funky Brain. I want to just first talk to you before we get started about Life Mastery School. It's a series of free videos on my website, dennisberry.com, and I encourage you all to head over there. There's videos on addiction recovery, mindfulness, and meditation, love and relationships, health and wellness. Just check it out. It's all free. I'm sure you'll find something interesting to watch. And our guest today is a super fun woman, and she's an award-winning two-time TEDx speaker, author, humorist, and media host who teaches audience to uncover their brilliance and resilience 15 minutes at a time. She's the author of Brilliantly Resilient, the 15-minute master, and women's book of dirty words. Can't wait to hear more about that. And she proves that small changes can create life-altering transformations, allowing individuals to be positive and successful in a rapidly changing world. She's a Huffington Post, Thrive Global contributor, and columnist for numerous websites. I love her style and her fun, positive energy. Miss Mary Fran Bontempo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Dennis. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're going to have a fun talk today. And how's 2021 going for you so far?
2020 was obviously a global sucker punch, but having said that, it also allowed time for reflection, for building new things, for kind of just taking that step back, that pause, which I have found is essential for my sanity and for any kind of progress. It's been an interesting year for everyone, but I will have to say that it wasn't the opportunity it gave for reflection was welcome. It was horrible. And obviously there are better ways, but given that it's given me an opportunity to even figure out more what's really important. So it's good. 2021's good.
Yeah, that's great. I love all the analogies there. The global sucker punch. And I just got off with a client of mine. It's been a year and a half of sobriety. And he, at first he was all fired up and jacked up and he was like doing all the work. After 30 years, he got to this new level where he's willing to grow and all this cool stuff happened. And then he kind of slid backwards for a few months. And now he's just coming out of that. This time for reflection you talked about. He's just coming out of that 3 months of and I was watching it happen. I've been working with him for over a year, watching him slide back into old behaviors and beliefs and just kind of being unhappy, not really, just kind of going through the motions, And I think we all go to that place. And from that pain and suffering comes the new levels of growth and awareness.
I think you're totally right. And I think we have to stop labeling those periods of time as fails or whatever, because you need that. Even if you maintain certain beliefs and they are your core beliefs, at certain periods of time, you're like, oh God, I have to think about that again, and it's just like, I can't do it. So it's okay to hit the pause button and just maybe not do anything. We always think we have to be achieving. Sometimes the best opportunities to achieve come right after those time periods where we go, you know what? I got to hit the pause button. I just have to rest. I have to see what develops. And, it's become a philosophy for me. Put an action out into the world and then take a step back and see what the heck happens. Because if you're going to initiate action, you obviously have to wait for the other variables to respond to that. So allow yourself the grace of time to rest and think and see what develops. That doesn't necessarily mean your core stuff is going to change, but you might get a little bit of a different perspective on it. And that's always a good thing.
We've been conditioned to think that we always have to be moving and doing all the time. And sometimes it's like the hardest action in the world to take, because we've been so conditioned, is no action.
Completely. And it serves us so well. But because we feel like if we're not producing, we're failing or we're slacking or whatever, we don't value that. And I'm telling you, if you don't build that into your life, you're just going to fry yourself out. You can't sustain nonstop action. It's completely impossible.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
That's right. So tell us what got you to this point where you are. Tell us a little about your story and how it brought you to what you do today.
I'll give you the condensed version because the real version is decades long, but I'll give you the condensed version.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome. On Mother's Day of 2010, I learned that my son was a heroin addict. This didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like I had this great kid one day and then the next day I woke up and he was an addict. We had been having problems and issues with him for many years, most of which I managed to explain away. I always say the two closest companions, and I do not call them friends, of the train that's coming at you, the train wreck that's coming of crisis, are denial and distraction. You look at these things, and because you cannot wrap your head around it, you deny it. And then in the case of addicts, they are very good at deflecting. And, there would be a complete mess going on. And then David would recognize he was right on the edge and he would pull back. And, oh, I'm sorry, Mom, everything's fine. So then I would distract myself. I'd go, okay, he's fine. And I would distract myself, allow life to distract me from what was headed towards us. And that culminated on, as I said, Mother's Day of 2010, when we were visiting my mother. He could not get his hands on heroin that day, so he overdosed on a pain medication that he had stolen. It landed him in the hospital. And the doctors actually said to me, if we cannot reverse the effects of this, because it was very high in acetaminophen, what he took, he will need a liver transplant if he makes it. So that was Mother's Day of 2010. And I was like, that moment changes everything. Fast forward to when he was getting out of the hospital a couple days later, I said to him, you got a choice. It happened to be a bus going by. I said, see that bus out there? You can get on it and go to one of your so-called friends' houses and I'll get you your stuff, or you can get in the car with me and your father and you're going to rehab. That was his first stint in rehab, which, was kind of forced on him. So as you can imagine, it went well for a period of time. And then he came home after a couple months in a recovery house, relapsed, and we went on that journey again. But my journey in all of that was obviously trying to redefine who I was, trying to figure out what the mother of an addict was supposed to do. How do you help? How do you, maintain some semblance of your own health and sanity? And I've always been a writer, and I've always gone to humor. So as strange as it sounds, that was the place that I went back to. That's my sweet spot. So I started writing and came up with a couple of my books and stuff, and have written articles about addiction from the family perspective. And that's kind of where I am now. The 2 TEDx talks that I did were both grounded. Everything that I do now, just to sum up, is grounded in the experience of David's addiction.
Yeah, what a story. I mean, it's a kind of a more common story nowadays, I think.
Oh, for sure. And I think that was part of my problem at first. You have an image of what an addict looks like, and what the family of an addict looks like, and what the mother of an addict looks like. And then like one day I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, oh, wait, that's me, and it's this completely incongruous thing in your head. And then all of a sudden you're forced to a reckoning. But the beauty of that is that it opens your mind to, hey, you know what? I didn't pick this. You don't pick a lot of things in life, but here's where we are. So now how do we move forward from that?
Yes, well put. Here's where we are. Let's start where your feet are. Yeah,
Yes.
I love that. Yeah. And I love it. What another thing you said was like, this is a picture of what an addict and alcoholic looks like. And I remember I was in rehab, which was 18 years ago. And they were like, write down your picture of what that looks like. And everybody has the same picture. It's the trench coat. It's the scruff and the 2-day beard and a paper bag underneath a bridge.
I don't know if you know of Kensington or what Kensington is, but it's the hub of drugs in Philadelphia, and it's under an elevated train. It looks like a scene from hell. It really looks like a scene from hell, but that's what our impression of an addict was.
Yeah. Well, I think our job and what we do, but this is why I do what I do, and I think what you do, is to bring awareness to the fact that that's not what it looks like anymore. It takes on many different faces. I used to go to AA a lot, and I used to sit in meetings with, some of those people. And I also sat in meetings with public figures and judges and rock stars and doctors and lawyers and everybody in between. So Yeah. Alcohol, drugs, they don't respect anybody. They're like, we'll take hold of you and we'll put you in the gutter.
Yeah,
So
they don't discriminate. I mean, honestly, when you look at it, they're probably very, very evolved because they don't discriminate. They don't discriminate based on anything. If you're, unlucky enough to go into that world, there's a good chance that you're going to get hooked, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I was your son. And like we talked about this briefly before we turned the camera on, but it was my mother was you. I said she cried herself to bed every day, every night for 15 years. And finally, what happened was she'll tell you this. She said, I had to just turn you over.
Oh my gosh, that is one of the TEDx talks that I gave was about the power of surrender. And what I said was, it doesn't mean you give up. It means you give it up. So you still care, you still do what you can, but you recognize that it's not up to you. The end result is not up to you. And as a parent, that's just crushing. But when you accept it, it's also very freeing because then you can give the best of yourself, but you have to not be attached to the outcome because you cannot control that. So, like, that's another one of my through lines. Don't be married to outcomes. You can't control it. But if you can go to bed at night knowing that you gave the best of yourself and that you tried to help either someone in your family or someone else, that can be enough.
Yeah, beautiful. You've obviously learned a lot through all this pain.
Yeah, it sucked, but I did get smarter.
Yeah. Well, and that's the kind of the goal every day,
Yeah.
really, is continue to learn and grow,
Yeah.
and it's not always easy and it's not always the way you would choose it for it to go, but you always want to keep growing. The problems happen when you stop growing. I think a lot of people, when they get into fear, insecurity, the depression, all what happens is the world changed and I didn't change along with it. So now I'm full of fear and worry because I have to learn something new. And people get stuck there and they get stuck in this hole and underneath a bunch of stuff. And they don't realize that that's not permanent. Like you can just step out and start to change. And then you don't have to feel that way anymore.
And I think that's the issue. I think people get overwhelmed by the hugeness of changes. But this is what, when I wrote this book, The 15-Minute Master, everything that I wrote in here came out of David's addiction. What I say to people is, look, you're not going to fix everything. Odds are you're not going to fix much. You're just not going to fix much. You can improve it, you can deal with it, but the odds of you fixing it, that's kind of slim. But what you can do is live within the next 15 minutes. That's it. Like when you're in crisis mode, 15 minutes. I just got to get through 15 minutes and don't even attach an action to it. Let it unfold and go, I got to get through the next 15 minutes. And then you get through the next 15 minutes and then the next. And then before you know it, the crisis part of that has passed. And then what you can do is ask yourself three major questions. And they're very simple and deceptively so. What can I do? And that doesn't mean wishful thinking. What can I do? That means, what am I able to do to affect this situation? What power do I have? What resources and knowledge do I have to affect the situation? The next question you ask yourself is, what should I do? Because just because we can do something doesn't always mean we should do it. Is this something I need to insert myself in? Will this situation be better or worse if I act? Sometimes, like we said before, you got to take the pause. You got to step back and go, hey, I'm out of my league. I can't do anything about this. It's terrible, but I can't. So it's, what should you do? And then the last question is simply, what am I going to do? And the goal in asking yourself these three questions is one single action step. One, not solving the problem. And you implement that action step, you see what happens, and you kind of work the system again. It's what got me through those years of terror and pain and confusion with my son.
Yeah, I love it. The whole concept. And it reminds me of a concept that I heard very early in sobriety, and that was just do the next right thing.
Yes. And David and I have talked about that. And interestingly enough, my model sort of became a natural thing because I really had no other choice. I realized very early on that I was not going to solve this problem and I was not going to come up with a big solution. So I had to come up with these little steps. And it was interesting because David and I talked further down the line and he said that to me. And I was like, that's exactly the way you have to live. You do the next right thing. And that right thing may be different depending on the experiences of you, where you are, like in a different time frame, the next right thing might be something different. But in this moment, what can I do? What should I do? What's the right thing to do?
I agree. And I tell that to people, like sometimes the next right thing is like, go get some ice cream.
Yes.
Or take a shower or put pants on.
Yeah.
Do something and do the next right thing. Don't worry about what I have to do tomorrow. Tomorrow's not here. In fact, I might not make it to tomorrow. But
That's exactly
let's just
right.
do the next right thing. And that got me through a lot of dark times because we were always trying to figure out what I'm doing tomorrow. Like,
Exactly.
well, what about now?
Depending again on your circumstances, and this is part of the book too, the next right thing may require either bravery, it may require that you do nothing, or it may require that you retreat. And you have to consider all of those things as options and viable options. You don't always have to run headlong into something and try to solve the problem, because sometimes things will unknot themselves if you give them time. And sometimes if you step back, maybe do a little self-care and let somebody else take a turn at it, maybe that's the right answer. So there are options with each of these places, even when we don't see them at first, because we think we have to be active all the time. No, you don't. Like you said, go get some ice cream and watch something on Netflix. Like, just chill. That sometimes that's all you can do, but it's the next right thing for you.
Yeah, I agree. Beautiful stuff. I love it. Now, is yours geared? Well, it's probably geared towards anybody, but is it geared towards the addict or the enabler or the person who's just looking for answers, probably?
Well, you know what's interesting about that question, and it's a great question. I came to this process, which I call it this sort of system, through my own crisis. But what I realized as things got better, as David started to heal, as he got further into sobriety, was that I was still using that system. So it transferred very easily to anybody. I mean, anybody can use it. And if you're experiencing a work issue, if you're experiencing a family relationship issue, what can I do? What should I do? What am I going to do? They're very simple questions that pretty much apply to everything. And they're useful in crisis, or they're useful in, okay, I got to pick up the kids, get the dry cleaning, and make dinner. Like which one of those what do I do right now? Where do I go? So it was a process that originated in crisis for me, but has become very useful in pretty much any life situation. So I encourage people, if they're experiencing challenges, to do it. And then if you do it often enough, it just becomes a natural part of the way you end up thinking. And it just frees you from so much other crap that you can't control.
Yeah. And I think it's a fundamental principle. And I think that what happens is, like, when we learn something like this, it's applicable for the rest of our lives. But we continue to make life more complicated, and then we get overwhelmed again. And then so that we have to revert back to the simple fundamental shit. We're like, all right, I need to go back to just, sometimes I get myself into, you look at me. So I'm not the man I used to be. I'm a healthy, happy, successful man. And you see that. You didn't see the pain that it took to get me here. And sometimes now, because I have all this stuff going on, that I have to go back to sometimes the next right thing. That I have to go back to that 15 minutes, because I'm worrying about next week, next month, next year. And I get overwhelmed and I have to go back to the beginning again. But it'll take me like 2 months to figure that out.
And I think we have to be kind to ourselves and give ourselves the grace of knowing that just because you learn this stuff doesn't mean you're always going to remember it. Right. I mean, you walk into a room and you go, what did I come in here for? Like we forget things all the time, and we forget these principles, because if we've learned them in challenging situations and that situation abates somewhat and calms down, it's kind of natural to go back to some of these older things, even if we've practiced these things for a long time. I always go back to the idea of, I don't know if you do yoga. I do yoga, not as regularly as I would like, but the most accomplished yogis, yoga teachers, never ever say they do yoga. They say they practice yoga because it's a continual practice and a continual learning of these things always. And they don't always do the fancy schmancy poses. Sometimes they just do the real basic stuff because sometimes you got to go back to the basics. But we have to allow ourselves to do that without seeing it as a failure. It's not a failure. It's just humanity. It's just life. That's how it goes. You take 10 steps forward and sometimes you take 5 back, but allow yourself the grace of not seeing that as a failure. It's just who we are.
I'm going through a big move right now in my life, and I kind of got overwhelmed because I have a busy business and I do a lot. I do this stuff and clients and all the stuff that I do. And I'm moving to another country and liquidating my whole last 30 years of my life. And I got overwhelmed. And I said to kind of a colleague of mine, and I was like, I'm overwhelmed and I underestimated my ability to handle it all, to do it all. And she said, well, then don't do it all. I was like, and I teach people this shit for a living. And I was like, what? This was like maybe 5-6 days ago. And I've been forgiving myself for the last week. And I've been feeling better. I mean, it was making me sick physically. And I was like, why am I doing this to myself? Oh, I don't have to.
Yeah, I love that word that you just put in there about forgiving yourself. We have to sometimes take a step outside of ourselves and go, would I be telling my friend to keep at it this way? Or would I be saying, yo, lighten up on yourself?
Yeah.
Like we have to give ourselves permission to lighten up on ourselves. We're the hardest critics of ourselves. We expect ourselves to be superhuman. And not only can't we do everything, we don't need to. Some of this stuff just doesn't have to get done. It just doesn't, it'll, and if it has to get done, it'll get done eventually. And if it doesn't get done to your exact specifications, here's my new mantra. Oh, well, I tried.
Move on. Yeah, I love that. So let's dive into the dirty words.
So the dirty words book came about, when things were at our worst with David, I needed lightness. I need humor. I needed to not think about that stuff. So, but that being said, it was about thinking about that stuff because it was about our self-talk. It was about the way words come to mean one thing to us and another thing to other people. So, I would hear words like change and, you panic. And then I think, yeah, but if things don't change where I am right now, it's going to be really bad for the rest of my life. So it was about tweaking words that came to mean things to me because of my life experiences, and how to reframe those words to be opportunity instead of like this kind of locked down prison place where they'd get me stuck in a spot and I'd be like, I can't do that because this means that. Well, no, it doesn't. Like words mean what we allow them to mean. And it was silly things. It was things like vacation, which, for a lot of women in particular means, oh my God, I have to do 5-star general planning now to get this to all work out perfectly. But then just as you said, but it doesn't have to work out perfectly. Like, no, change the way those words have come to circle in your mind and allow them to mean something else that gives you a break and gives you some kind of enjoyment. So that was where that came from. When we get involved in some of these things, these sort of self-improvement things, they can be very heavy-handed, and that can be even further exhausting. So I try to do all this with a very light hand and basically give people the message of, you got to lighten up on yourself. You got to surrender. Surrender was another one of the words. Surrender, people think that means give up. It doesn't mean give up. It means give yourself a freaking break.
Surrender to win.
Yes.
I was taught.
It's perfect. It's just perfect because when we let go of trying to control everything, we actually get more done.
Yeah, beautiful.
And it's stuff that's more true to us and what's important to us. Because if you really take a look at what surrender means and you live true to your values, you can forget about a lot of crap.
Yeah. Yeah, it's establishing boundaries, self-love, self-care, and self-respect. And, people get hung up on things like that too. And I love your concept, the book of dirty words, because we have an idealistic idea of how things are supposed to be. I always say the big one for me is the M word and B word, the moderation and balance. I was never good at any of that stuff. I'm still not. I just don't drink anymore because I'm not good at that.
Yeah.
And or do drugs because I can't do that. But
Yeah.
I'm still not good at eating like a cookie. I'm still not good at, eating anything. I'm like, I need a pound of things, so I have to watch myself with that. I'm not good at exercising a little bit, right? I have to like, run races and do heavy things. Otherwise, I don't feel like I'm accomplished. So I have to reel it in a
Yeah.
lot every now and then.
Well, yeah, and I mean, by all means, allow yourself to go crazy every once in a while and really
Yeah.
get into it, but don't make that your norm. I hesitate to have anybody make anything their norm except living true to your values. Because, there are days when you have energy, there are days when you don't have energy. So listen to your body, listen to yourself, practice that sense of self care. And this is another big thing with me, listen to your gut. If it doesn't feel right, for God's sake, don't do it. There's
Right.
something wrong. If everything lines up logically, but your gut's going, this is not a good thing. I don't care how well it lines up logically. Do not do it. Honor that instinct.
Well, that's not how we're trained. Like,
No.
we're trained in this world, in this like crazy world that we live in, that people call the real world. This isn't the real world. This is the sick, crazy world that has everybody on Xanax and
Yeah.
pissed off and angry and not knowing why. So we have to work real hard and do things we don't want to do, even though it doesn't feel right. So we can save money and spend a lot of money to go back to the real world where everything's calm and peaceful. Instead, I'm moving to the real world because I want to be calm and peaceful all the
Yeah.
time. I don't want to be doing things that my gut are telling me not to because I was trained to do those anyway, because that's how you become successful.
That's another one of those dirty words. I mean, what does that even mean? Successful.
Success.
And we have
Ooh.
to define that based on who we are. And, anybody can have a sense of, I have to do this. I have to do that, based again on the way we're trained. And that is why our brains are our biggest gift and our biggest curse at the same time, because we have this ability to create, to do, to, make wonderful things happen. And that's all well and good. But if we don't balance that, and I kind of hate the word balance too, that's another one of the dirty words, because it really doesn't exist. Most of the time you're like this or you're like this. But if we don't, let's say, recognize that brain power has to be put in comparison with that gut of what's telling you is right or wrong, the brain's going to steer you wrong. It's going to steer you wrong, because what we've been taught, as you said, as what we should do and what's logical is not always true to our value system. It's not always right for us in the moment. There's another time when a choice might be the perfect one, but in a certain moment, it may not be the right choice. And that's where you always have to go back to your gut. What is my instinct telling me? Is this a good thing to do, or do I need to step back and take a break?
For any moms or anybody out there struggling and they're in that dark spot and they don't think they're going to get out, like, what's some words of advice that you could throw out there?
Like I said, live within the next 15 minutes. Do not put pressure on yourself to solve this entire crisis. You will not be able to solve it, and you will actually make yourself more miserable, if that's even possible, than where you are right now, if you continue to put that pressure on yourself. Live within the next 15 minutes. If that means just get through it, then just get through it. If that means running those 3 questions through your head and saying, okay, what's one action step that I can do? Run the 3 questions through your head. What can you do? What should you do? And then what are you going to do? Build up your tribe. It's very lonely, you think, when you're in that situation. But the more you start talking to people, and I'm not saying you got to give them your whole life story. Sometimes it might be just, if you're working and you're overwhelmed with stuff, just say to your team, look, I got a lot of stuff going on right now. I need some help. You don't need to tell everybody every dirty detail, but it is okay to say to people, I'm really struggling with some things right now. I need a little help, and be specific about how they can help you. Don't just don't put it out there that you need help and then don't tell people what to do because they don't know. So, give yourself the 15 minutes, ask yourself the basic questions and build up your tribe and put your hand up if you need help. And that can be, hey, reach out to me online. I talk to moms and families all of the time about this kind of stuff. My son and I have made it kind of our mission to do that because otherwise it kind of just is our personal yuck and it needs to mean more than that.
Yeah, use what you've been given. I love that. And I was in the sauna a couple of weeks ago and there's this kid at the gym and he knows what I do and I'm almost 50 and he's like, I think he was like 24 or something. He has a couple kids, young kids. And he goes, Dennis, what's one word of advice that you can give to a young guy starting out? And I said, always continue to ask for help. I said that and I stand by it because I was taught it's okay not to know as long as you know you don't know. And it's like people get stuck on having to know everything, just like I have to do this and I have to be successful. I have to make money and do that. But it's okay. If you don't know, ask for help.
My friend and I, within the last year, started the whole Brilliantly Resilient, as you can see behind me, the whole Brilliantly Resilient thing. My friend Kristen, talk about sucker punches and train wrecks. You obviously know my story. Kristen's 2 sons were born blind. And she has 3 children. Her daughter is sighted. Her 3rd child, her daughter Carissa, is sighted. But her 2 boys were born blind. She had no idea what to do with any of this. So what she did, same as I did, we came together because we realized, even though we didn't know each other at the time, that our processes were very similar. 15 minutes, get through this, find the next thing to do, but work your brilliance. And if you don't know how to do something, that's when you put your hand up and you ask for help. Every one of us has a brilliance, something that we're good at. What's the stuff that people come to you and say, hey, can you help me out with this? Or, hey, you're really good at that. The stuff that we tend to think that our brilliance has to be complicated because we've been taught, especially in this country, if it doesn't require blood, sweat, and tears, it's not worth anything.
That's
the complete opposite of what your brilliance is. Your brilliance is that sweet spot that you slide right into. Do that.
Yes.
And if you don't know what you're doing with other stuff, ask somebody else because that'll be their sweet spot.
I've been talking about this more recently, is that if you're laying in bed in the morning with the covers over your head because you're scared to get out of bed, to go to work, to make the money, to get out of debt and pay for that house that's overvalued that you can't afford, then I would say it's because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, or you're doing what you're not supposed to be doing. I say we have to find that sweet spot, that thing that fills your soul, that makes you want to kick the covers off and jump out of bed in the morning. If you don't feel that way, you're letting time pass you by.
You are. And I mean, let's be realistic. You got to pay your bills, but that doesn't mean that there are not parts of your life where you can work your brilliance. And I would say to anybody who's trying to figure out what their brilliance is, be of service. When you find a place where you want to help people, that's when the best of you comes out. It's when you're at the top of your game because you're not thinking about yourself and you want to help somebody else. And that will reveal to you those things that you're really good at. Like you might be a super organizer and you don't even see that because it's just, maybe in your job, it's not something that you get a chance to work. But when you're of service and you can help people, that's when you start to see that rise in, oh my God, this is fueling me. Because you answer service calls with your heart and then your skill set comes out. And that's when that comes into play. That's how you're brilliant.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I've created my life around that whole principle. And I had to be taught that. And it's funny, some people I think are naturally, they naturally do that. They help other people. I was selfish. I was more of a selfish kid. I remember my next door neighbor used to help my mother more than I did. Like he would come over, hi, Miss Barry, how you doing? How can I help you today? And I'd be laying on the couch watching TV. And I was like,
and calling him names in your head. Like, what a jerk. He's making
me look bad. So I had to be taught that. And it wasn't until later in sobriety that I really picked up on it on a deep level that I'm selfish. And not in like I'm the biggest loser in the world, but it's a human condition. And it's just bringing awareness to the situation. Now, what are we going to do about it? Oh, now I live a life of service and I feel better. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
you do. Because again, it responds to what's important to you. It responds to your value system. If you're not living true to your value system, you're not going to be happy.
true.
And that doesn't mean that there's not one set of values. My values are going to be different from yours, and they're no better or worse. They just are. But you have to figure out what that is to you. What is your value system? Is it hard work? Is it honesty and truth? Is it is it success, monetary success? Like there are different values, and none of them are better or worse, provided they don't hurt people. But you have to figure out what that means for you. And that's where you're going to find your brilliance. And that's where you're going to be more resilient. You're going to have that bounce because you're always going to be in that place that's true to you. So when the sucker punches and train wrecks come, and trust me, they're coming,
Yes.
that's when you get to bounce.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Here's a question I love throwing out to my guests is like, if you can go back to your 15-year-old self and have a talk with that girl, what would you tell her?
I tell her to lighten up. I would tell her to just lighten up. Don't be married to outcomes. Let life evolve, which doesn't mean don't try. It just means don't try to force things to happen that maybe aren't supposed to happen. That is such an important lesson, because when I didn't feel like I was achieving whatever that meant for me at the time, like I had gotten scholarships to school and college and all that. So I felt like I had to be a certain thing. I bought into that, and I lived with so much stress for so many years because it didn't feel like me, So I would say to kids, lighten up. It's going to be fine. Relax and let life evolve, and be true to what's in here in your heart. Don't worry about what everybody else is telling you need to be.
Yeah, that's that trust your gut thing.
Yeah, trust your gut. It
Yeah.
it never steers you wrong. If you listen to your gut, you will not go wrong. There is not an addict in the world who ever took a pill or a needle or whatever and thought this is a good idea, like in their gut.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like in their gut, like they wanted it. But if they had taken that nanosecond, and of course they can't because the pull of that is so hard, and I understand that. But if at the very beginning they take that second and go, is this a good idea? And listen to their gut would have been going, no, don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, it's about learning new ways of living. Like, because I was the addict and the alcoholic, and you spend a couple decades in that lifestyle, and then I have to unlearn all that and find new ways, new healthy ways of living and coping, and not die and not fall into cross addictions.
Yes.
Oh, I'm going to give up heroin and drinking, but now I'm going to start watching porn and eating chocolate all day.
Yes.
So those are more just distractions from the real problem, which is my funky brain.
Yes.
That's where that
get
comes
to the
from.
bottom of it. And you know what I would say to kind of piggyback on that idea of what you tell a 15-year-old, don't be afraid to walk away. Like, don't be afraid to just go, nope, and walk away.
So tell us how to get in touch with Mary Fran Bontempo.
I also have a website with my buddy, brilliantlyresilient.net. We are all over the place with all this good stuff that we learned that we kind of want to share with everybody, so that everybody else's journey not only is a little easier, but here's the thing, when everybody's working their brilliance, we all rise. So that's the goal. Get everybody out there to be resilient, work their brilliance, and become that 15-minute master, and live in those bite-sized pieces and handle your stuff.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Mary, for coming on the Funky Brain podcast today.
It's been such a joy, Dennis. Thank you so much for having me.
It is. We'll do it again sometime. And thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Funky Brain podcast today. I hope you heard something that you found useful. I know I did. Have a beautiful day today, unless you have other plans. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye. One of the most common questions I get is, how do I become more successful? I see everybody else getting where they want to be in life, but I'm still stuck. There could be many reasons, but the main reason I find in people being stuck is lack of focus and, of course, accountability. So there are 3 key steps to focused success. Number 1 is intention. Taking action with intention. Intentions should be extremely exciting and reasonable, not umbrella goals. They need to be realistic and achievable. Like if you're making 50 grand a year and you want to make $1 million a year, that's probably not going to happen right away. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just probably not going to happen next year. But what if we can get you to 100 grand next year? That would be double your income. That's awesome, right? And it's a huge achievement. Once we set these goals and we're intentional about the steps to get us there, then we have something concrete to work on. And now that's exciting. And they need to be in writing, not just in your brain. Remember, my brain is my problem. I think all the time, all over the place. I need to write them down and get them concrete. Now that's intention. The second step for focused success is gratitude. Create gratitude statements that are fun and passionate, but truthful and focused in reality. So if you're making 50 grand a year and you want to make 100 grand, then say, I'm grateful for the work I get to do to keep me living my life so I can get to my goal. I'm grateful for eating well and exercising so I can get to my goal of losing 50 pounds. I'm grateful for my kids, my partner, my house, my pool, my car. Stay in gratitude. There's no better way to stay positive and on track than living in gratitude. Third step for focused success is action. And action steps are everything. Let me repeat that. Action steps are everything. Once we clearly define our goal, our one thing, then we can create specific action steps to take on a regular basis to help get us there. And here's a huge piece. They must be uncomfortable, or we cannot expect change. They cannot be effortless, or there will be no change. Remember, the way that I've been doing things, my work habits, my drinking habits, my eating habits, whatever, they got me stuck here. So I need to do things a little differently than I have been doing, or I probably won't see different results. I mean, think about it. If I could have achieved these things on my own, I probably would have by now. So these goals, they need to be measurable. They need to be put on a timeline. Monday at 10 a.m., I'm doing this. Tuesday at noon, I'm doing this. When I'm working with my clients, we have lots of homework. And when I ask them, when will you have this done? And they say something like, maybe by the end of next week, I say, that's bullshit. Please have that to me by tomorrow morning, tomorrow by dinner at the latest. This is how you get results. The old you without an accountability partner would say, maybe by the end of next week. And then nothing would ever get done. That's how we got stuck here in the first place. Does that make sense? So hopefully some of this rings true with you and you're ready to make drastic changes in your life. If you don't know where to begin, or if you're looking for that push to get you to the next level, please reach out. Give me a call and set up a free session to start radically changing your life forever. The most satisfactory years of your life lie ahead. Life isn't over, it's just starting. I'll talk to you soon. Have a beautiful day today.